3 days after my husband's funeral, my children brought condo brochures to my kitchen table. They said it was for my safety. But I heard the word they didn't say, inheritance. So I smiled, and I started preparing the deed they were begging for. Because when they finally got what they wanted, they didn't realize it came with something else. And the moment they found out, everything changed. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. These stories aren't just stories. They're pieces of a life I've carried quietly for years, and your support truly means more than you know. Daniel used to say our house had a heartbeat. He would stand in the kitchen doorway on Sunday mornings, coffee in one hand, watching the light slide across the hardwood floors. And he'd smile like a man who had built something that mattered. In a way, he had. We bought that house in Marietta when I was 26. He was 30. We had exactly $800 left after closing. Our first sofa was second-hand. Our first winter, the heater rattled so loudly we thought it might explode. We laughed through most of it. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, 66 years old, retired school librarian, arthritis in my left knee when storms roll in. Still wake up at 6:15 out of habit. Daniel and I were married 42 years. 42. That's packed lunches before sunrise, balancing checkbooks at midnight, whispered arguments so the children wouldn't hear, and holding hands under hospital lights when things felt uncertain. We raised 2 children there. Andrew first, then Claire. They learned to walk on those floors, learned to argue on those stairs, learned to leave from that front porch, and I stayed. After Daniel passed, the house grew quiet. Not peaceful quiet, the kind that hums in your ears. For the first week, I kept setting out 2 coffee mugs. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I'd fold his flannel shirt and lay it across the back of his chair. Straighten the collar, smooth the fabric. Small rituals. They made the air feel less empty. The funeral was full. Daniel had worked as a contractor for decades. Honest work, fair work. People respected him. They hugged me, called me strong. I nodded, smiled, folded my hands so they wouldn't see them tremble. That night, I slept on his side of the bed, just to feel closer. Andrew works in finance now, sharp suits, quick numbers. His wife, Melissa, carries herself like she's always presenting something. Claire works in marketing. Her husband Greg sells luxury cars and confidence. They're busy people, important people, at least that's how they speak about themselves. After Daniel passed, the Sunday dinners stopped. Deadlines, travel, meetings. 3 days after the funeral, Andrew came by. No call, no warning. He laid glossy brochures across my dining table. Condos, retirement communities, gated neighborhoods with fountains. "Mom," he said gently, "this house is too much for you now." Too much. I looked around, at the dent in the wall from Andrew's baseball throw, at the framed photo of Claire in her graduation robe, at the scratch on the floor from when Daniel dragged in a Christmas tree that was far too large. Too much? I'd held that house together for 40 years. "I'm fine here," I said. Melissa smiled softly. "It's about safety and smart planning." Smart planning. Daniel and I knew about planning. We once ate pasta 3 nights a week to keep that mortgage paid. We fixed our own roof during a thunderstorm because hiring someone wasn't in the budget. There was a pause that afternoon, a shift in the air. Andrew cleared his throat. You could sell while the market's strong. There it was, not safety, timing. I didn't argue, I just listened. After they left, I washed the dishes slowly, dried each one twice. Then I went upstairs. I opened Daniel's cedar chest, ran my fingers over the carved initials inside the lid, and something settled inside me. Not anger, not yet, just awareness, like distant thunder rolling across a summer sky. That evening I walked through every room, touched the doorframes, adjusted the curtains. stood in the hallway staring at the family portraits. I felt the shift. The quiet peace I'd been clinging to was already slipping away, and I didn't know it then. But that silence was the last real peace I would feel for a long time. They didn't even wait a week. That's what stayed with me later. Not that they wanted the house, but how quickly they moved. Andrew returned 4 days later, Melissa beside him, and a man in a navy blazer carrying a leather folder. Just a preliminary evaluation, Andrew said lightly. He's a property assessor. I was standing in the hallway holding a basket of laundry. A what? I asked. The man gave me a polite smile. Your son requested a valuation. Valuation, like I was already gone. I didn't request anything, I said. Andrew's jaw tightened. We're trying to be proactive, Mom. Proactive. Melissa drifted into the kitchen without asking. She ran her hand along the counters. Open concept would increase resale value, she murmured. Resale. Daniel built those cabinets himself. Stayed up sanding until midnight. Measured twice before every cut. Please leave, I said quietly. Andrew sighed like I was being difficult. You've been through trauma, he said. You're not thinking clearly. I buried my husband. I wasn't confused. My mind works fine, I replied. They exchanged a look. That look. The one that says she doesn't understand the numbers. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came on Tuesday. Claire called. Mum, we need to discuss estate efficiency. Estate efficiency. I sat at the kitchen table staring at Daniel's empty chair. What does that mean? I asked. Greg's voice came through faintly. It makes sense to transition assets early. Avoid probate. Transition. Assets. You mean the house? I said. Well, yes, Claire answered carefully. It'll be ours eventually. Eventually. They were already living in a version of the future where I didn't exist. 2 days later, they arrived together. All 4 of them. Andrew used his old key. I heard the lock click, and something inside me grew very still. They sat in my living room like a board meeting. Folders stacked neatly, papers organized. Andrew cleared his throat. We've scheduled the listing for next month. Scheduled, without asking. You what? I said softly. Melissa slid a document toward me. Just sign and we can streamline everything. Streamline. Claire leaned forward. This house is too big. The taxes alone are ridiculous. I've paid those taxes for 40 years, I said. Greg leaned back in Daniel's chair. It's inefficient to cling to sentimentality. Sentimentality. That word landed like a slap. That house wasn't sentiment. It was scraped knees. Homework, at the dining table, Christmas mornings, before sunrise. Andrew looked at me with that calm banker tone. You could clear close to 800,000, he said. Invest it wisely. Secure your future. Secure my future. My future is here, I said. There was silence. I asked one simple question. If I sell, who gets the equity? Andrew hesitated. Well, Claire and I would inherit eventually. There it was, no more pretending, not safety. Not care, timing. They wanted it sooner. Melissa folded her hands neatly. It's just smart. I felt small for a moment. Smaller than I ever had in my own home. But then I remembered Daniel's voice. Never sign what you don't understand. I'm not selling, I said calmly. Claire's eyes narrowed. Mom, don't be dramatic. Dramatic. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I stood. This meeting is over. Andrew gathered the papers slowly. We'll come back when you're thinking rationally. Rationally. They walked out. The door closed. Silence returned to the house. I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at Daniel's photograph on the mantel. And something inside me went very, very quiet. Not broken, not angry. Quiet. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. After that meeting, the house felt different. Not emptier, not colder, just aware. I started locking the doors during the day, even when I was home. At night, I would wake at the smallest sound. The refrigerator humming, the house settling. Andrew texted every few days. Have you reconsidered? The market is shifting. We're only thinking about you, thinking about me. Claire sent links to retirement communities, photos of smiling couples in matching sweaters. I didn't respond. Instead, I folded Daniel's sweaters, one at a time, stacked them in the cedar chest. Some nights, I sat at the edge of the bed and held his wedding ring in my palm, rolled it between my fingers. 42 years. We didn't start with comfort. We started with nothing but effort. I remember driving Andrew to preschool with the heater barely working, Claire wrapped in 2 blankets in the back seat. Daniel worked overtime whenever it was offered. I tutored children after school to help cover groceries. We skipped vacations. We patched our own roof. We built that house with discipline and quiet sacrifice. And now, my children were speaking about it like a portfolio asset. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I returned from the grocery store and saw Melissa's car in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. She was inside my kitchen, measuring again. I'm thinking quartz instead of granite, she was saying into her phone. Yes, absolutely, we'll stage before listing. Listing. I set the grocery bags down carefully. What are you doing? I asked. She turned, startled. Oh, Eleanor! I assumed you'd agreed. I haven't, I said. She smiled, that thin smile. Not yet. Not yet, as if my grief had an expiration date. That night, rain tapped steadily against the windows. I walked barefoot through the house. The hallway photographs caught my eye. Andrew at 8, missing his front tooth. Claire at 12, holding her science fair ribbon. I remembered packing lunches before dawn, sewing Claire's recital costume by hand, driving Andrew to baseball practice after long workdays. When Daniel's business struggled years ago, we quietly refinanced the house. No one knew, not even the children. We absorbed the pressure together, and now they were treating it like surplus property. I stood in the living room and whispered their names. Not in anger, in disbelief. How did we raise children who understood value, but not meaning? The next morning, I opened Daniel's desk. He kept everything organized, down to labeled envelopes. In the bottom drawer was one slim envelope, my name written across it. In his handwriting, my chest tightened. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down slowly. I didn't open it right away. I just rested my palm on it. Outside, a delivery truck passed, life moving forward. Inside, something was shifting. When I finally opened it, I felt calm. Not hopeful, not afraid. Calm. Daniel had written clearly, steadily. He had prepared. Prepared for the possibility that grief would reveal people. Prepared for the possibility that love and inheritance would collide. By the time I reached the final page, my hands were no longer shaking. They were steady, very steady. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope. Then I made coffee. Strong. I sat at the table and watched the steam rise. I wasn't crying anymore. The hurt hadn't disappeared, but it had changed shape. It felt clearer now. Defined. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done, pretending. And that morning, for the first time since the funeral, I began to think very carefully. Daniel's letter wasn't emotional. It wasn't bitter. It was careful. That was always his way. Ellie, it began. If you're reading this, it means they moved faster than grief. I let out a breath when I read that line. He knew. 2 years before his final surgery, he inherited land in western Montana, a lakeside property near Flathead Valley, just over 500 acres. We honeymooned nearby when we were young. I remembered the mountains, the way the air smelled clean and sharp. I didn't know he had restored it. He renovated the main lodge, reinforced the beams, modernized the kitchen, built a wide porch facing the sunrise. He established a trust in my name alone, funded it quietly over time. Small transfers. Nothing dramatic. Enough to secure 20 years of taxes and maintenance. And the Georgia house? It wasn't what the children believed. The second mortgage still existed, refinanced during the recession, consolidated but never fully erased. Total debt? Just over 410,000. The equity they imagined was smoke. Daniel wrote clear instructions. Transfer the deed. Let them take full ownership. All assets, all liabilities. Give them exactly what they're asking for. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. They tried to sell my house after my husband died, so I handed them the deed, not out of spite. Out of clarity, I called the attorney listed in the letter. Rebecca Lawson, estate specialist in Missoula. She answered calmly. "I've been expecting your call," she said. Daniel had finalized everything. Trust documents complete. Deed transfer drafted. Legal protections secured. The Montana property was fully paid. My retirement accounts untouched. Only the Georgia house carried weight. I didn't rush. Revenge driven by anger burns fast. This would be measured. Over the next week, I softened my tone with the children. I returned Andrew's calls. "Yes, maybe the house is large," I admitted. "Yes, maybe it's time for a change." I let them believe they were persuading me. Meanwhile, I packed. Quietly. Daniel's watch. Family photo albums. My mother's quilt. Important records. I rented a small storage unit across town, moved items slowly, one carload at a time. Claire texted one afternoon. "We're proud of you for being open-minded, Mom." I stared at the message. Open-minded. I wasn't bending. I was preparing. Rebecca sent the final documents overnight. Thick envelope, heavy paper. I read every page twice. Ownership transfer effective immediately. All debts transfer with property. Taxes. Insurance. Mortgage balances. Legally airtight. I called Andrew. "I've made a decision," I said evenly. His excitement was immediate. "We'll come tonight." Of course they would. That evening, the house felt staged. Golden light through the windows. Dust drifting in quiet beams. They arrived together. Andrew, Melissa, Claire, Greg, all expectation. I placed the documents neatly on the dining table. "I've thought carefully," I began. "I don't want you worrying about my future." They nodded eagerly. "I'm transferring the deed," I said. Claire gasped softly. Melissa squeezed Andrew's hand. "It will be split evenly between you," I continued. Relief washed over their faces. That was the moment I knew. They hadn't asked about debt. They hadn't asked about statements. They had assumed. Andrew began reading. Then he paused. "Second mortgage?" he said slowly. Greg leaned forward. "How much?" I folded my hands calmly. "Roughly 410,000 in combined debt." Silence. Melissa blinked. "That's not possible." "You never asked to see the balances," I said. Andrew flipped through pages faster now. Property taxes, insurance, monthly payments close to $5,000. Claire's face drained of color. "You said it was nearly paid off." "I never said that," I replied gently. "You assumed." Greg let out a tight laugh. "This is financial sabotage." "No," I said softly. "It's ownership." Their imagined future was unraveling in real time, and I remained still. The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. No one raised their voice. That's what surprised me. There was no explosion, no shouting, just the sound of paper turning, breathing shifting, silence thickening. Andrew kept reading. His jaw moved slightly. Tight. Loosen. Tight again. Claire's fingers trembled as she flipped pages. Greg leaned back slowly. No more confidence in his posture. Melissa stared at the numbers like they might rearrange themselves. "They can't expect us to carry this," she said quietly. I didn't interrupt. The documents were clear. Ownership transfer, effective, immediately. All existing debts transferred with the property. "You're handing us a liability," Andrew said. "I'm handing you the house," I replied calmly. "The house you insisted was too valuable to keep." Claire looked up at me then. Really looked. "This place isn't worth what we thought." "I know," I said gently. Greg rubbed his forehead. "With fees and closing costs, we'll barely walk away with anything." "Then sell it," I said. That word landed heavily. Sell it. Just like they'd suggested to me. Andrew closed the folder slowly. "Why would Dad structure it this way?" he asked. There it was. Not why would you? Why would Dad? I felt something steady inside me. "Your father believed people should understand what they're asking for," I said. Melissa shook her head. "This feels intentional." "It is," I replied softly. Silence again, heavier now. Andrew stood and walked toward the window. "This could cost us thousands every month." "Yes," I said. "That's what ownership costs." Claire's voice trembled. "You're just leaving." "I'm moving," I corrected gently. "To Montana." That stopped them. "Montana?" Greg asked. "There's a property your father restored years ago," I said. "It's already paid for." Andrew stared at me. "You knew." I didn't answer. Some truths speak for themselves. Melissa's voice sharpened. "So we're stuck with this?" "You're responsible for it," I said. "That's different." Andrew looked down at the papers again. "This isn't what we expected." "No," I said, "it isn't." And that was the point. There were no dramatic accusations. No tears falling at my feet. Just the slow realization that their assumptions had weight. Real weight. They gathered their things quietly. Greg muttered something about attorneys. "You're welcome to consult one," I said calmly. Rebecca had prepared for that. Daniel had documented everything. Every refinance. Every signature. Every transfer. Clean, legal, final. Claire paused at the door. "You're choosing land over us." I held her gaze. "I'm choosing peace." The door closed behind them. The house exhaled. I stood alone in the living room, the same room where birthdays had been celebrated, where Daniel once danced with me after too much wine, where our children once sat cross-legged on Christmas morning. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt since the funeral. Relief, not victory. Relief. Sometimes the loudest moment in your life is when you say nothing at all. And in that silence, I finally felt free. Montana was quiet, in a way Georgia never was. The first morning, I stepped onto the porch just before sunrise, wrapped Daniel's old flannel around my shoulders. The lake was still, not a ripple. No traffic hum, no distant sirens, just wind brushing through pine trees. I stood there longer than I meant to, breathing. The lodge isn't flashy, it's solid, honest wood, wide beams. Windows that face the mountains like they're worth watching. Daniel redesigned the kitchen before he passed. Deep farmhouse sink, the kind of stove I always admired but never bought. He thought of everything. There's a reading chair by the east window. The sun touches it first every morning. He knew I'd sit there with coffee. And I do. Sometimes I speak to him out loud. "I made it," I say quietly. And I did. They tried to sell my house after my husband died, so I handed them the deed. Not because I hated them, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because respect matters, ownership matters, and love should never feel like a transaction. Andrew called 3 months later. The house had been sold, at a loss. There was no anger in his voice this time, just something smaller. "We were wrong," he said. I didn't rush to comfort him. "I hope you understand now," I replied. There was a long pause. "I do," he said. "Claire hasn't called yet." Maybe she needs time. Maybe she's still angry. I don't carry anger anymore. It's too heavy. Peace is lighter. Here, I plant wildflowers along the waterline. I mend small things around the property. I read more than I used to. I write when I feel like it. I move slower, not because I'm weak, because I choose to. Daniel once told me, freedom isn't loud, it's steady. He was right. Respect, once lost, can be reclaimed if you wait for the right moment. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be reduced. I didn't conquer anyone. I didn't destroy anyone. I walked away with dignity, and that was enough. Maybe justice isn't loud or fast. Maybe it's simply being able to sleep in peace again. And every night here, under a sky full of stars, I do. Would you have signed the deed if it were you? Tell me in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, I'd be honored if you listened to the next one.